The first of the Federalist Papers was written by Alexander Hamilton and published in the Independent Journal under the pseudonym Publius. After an unequivocal experience of the inefficiency of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. While our current federal government was created by the Constitution of the United States, it was not the first federal government for the United States of America. The government created under the Articles of Confederation had many issues, but mainly it had responsibility without the power to fulfill them. Probably the most well-known was the fact that the federal government under the Articles of Confederation could levy taxes against the states, but had no mechanism to force them to pay. So in Article 8 of the Article states, all charges of war and other expenses that shall be incurred for the common defense or general welfare and allowed by the United States and Congress assembled shall be defrayed out of a common treasury, which shall be supplied by the several states in proportion to the value of all land within each state. There was no mechanism to make sure the states supplied their part of the expenses. While many anti-federalists claim that Federalists wished to establish an aristocracy, that's not what the Federalists stated. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. Could the people establish good government on their own? Or did the government need to be forced upon them? If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which that decision is to be made, and a wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as a general misfortune of mankind. The decision of what kind of government would be set up for the young republic would be up to the people, as they would generally suffer the consequences. Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. The Federalists claim to desire a fair consideration of their position, their support of the drafted Constitution. What do they see as their obstacles? Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of the power, emolument, and consequence of the office they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by confusion of their country or will flatter themselves with fair prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government. It seems power and ambition are nothing new in this country. There are some who resist all change, whether for good or for ill. There are others whose ambition would drive them to place their own prospects over those of their country. And a future reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives not more laudable than these are apt to operate as well upon those who support as those who oppose the right side of a question. Both sides claim they were guided by purer principles than their opponents. Except for the older language, this could just as easily be a campaign flyer from a recent election. Whose principles are purer? Could both be pure, yet still disagree? And yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that it will happen in this as all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to evince the justness of their opinions and to increase the number of their converts by the loudness of their disseminations and the bitterness of their invectives. Needless to say, there were many accusations and name-calling from both sides, although as we'll see when we review Antifederalist number 1, Mr. Hamilton has a point. That's not to say he wasn't willing to throw a few verbal jabs at his opponents. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper fond of despotic power and hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and article, the stale bait for popularity at the expense of the public good. Yes, the Anti-Federalists stigmatized what Mr. Hamilton refers to as the energy and efficiency of government. Then again, a look at Washington, D.C. today shows that the Anti-Federalists concerned over such a powerful government should have been better heeded. On the other hand, it'll be equally forgotten that the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty, that in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interests can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidden appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has been found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than the latter, and that of those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. Mr. Hamilton makes a valid point. Without a vigorous government to protect the rights of the people, despotism has frequently found a way to power at the expense of those rights. In the course of the preceding observations, I have had an eye, my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts from whatever quarter to influence your decision in a manner of the utmost moment to your welfare, by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will, no doubt, at the same time, have collected from the general scope of them that they proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Ultimately, the decision about our nation's future was placed in the hands of her people. Our responsibility to ensure that governments at all levels remain servants of the people rather than their masters has never lessened. However, history has shown that we, the people, have become more interested in being ruled than governed. Yes, my countrymen, I owe to you that, after having given it an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is your interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness. Being a Federalist and one willing to spend the time and effort to write most of the Federalist Papers, it should be no surprise that Alexander Hamilton believes that the safest course for the people is to adopt the Constitution as drafted. That, however, is not to say that he was unaware of efforts to thwart its adoption. But the fact is that we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution that the 13 states are of too great extent for any general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct portions of the whole. Should the 13 states join together? Or would that nation be too large and unwieldy? Would the people be better served by a number of smaller confederacies? For nothing can be more evident that those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternative of an adoption of the new Constitution or a dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that union, the certain evils and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Now that there are 50 states in our union, what can we observe? Before I answer that question, let us consider the other side of the argument.